Let's see, I need this one, this one,
Yep.
and this one.
Yeah, give me that round one as well.
Round. Oh,
That's it. Cheers, mate.
today I'm going to show you how I turned one of my drawings into this little carving. What? We can start by getting a little carving practice with a pencil. I find it never turns out quite as well as with a decent sharpener though, and I enjoy using a comb sharpener. You can get a super pointy point with them. Rather than make a model for this carving, I decided to go with the silhouette method. I don't really know if it's called that, but it's what I like to call it. Basically, I draw a side view and a front view, and then typically I cut out the side view first, then I spin the wood around, draw on the front view, and cut away the waste. Stop. Mallet time. Fortunately, this little clamp can withstand some fairly serious malleting, and I know I'm like a Stanley Hobby Vice fanboy at this point, but just look at it doing its job so well. Oh, I forgot I used a drill too. Well, at least I only left out one tool. Oh, yeah, coping saw as well. With the magic of editing, I took away 500 flippin' hours of trying to put this coping saw back together. Cutting out this little shape marks the end of the roughing out of the side silhouette. Just need a little extra persuasion to come out. There we go. Sometimes I like to store wood chips in my sleeves. It should be no surprise to anyone that doing a thing many, many times makes you better at that thing. This is why I try to carve as much as I can. Here's a handy graph to show you what I mean. With that, the side and front silhouettes are cut out, so we can now concentrate on shaping specific areas. I started by thinning the legs down, but then quickly moved on to the head. I like to get the head close to its final shape, kind of early on in the carving, as we can generally make assumptions about the rest of the body based on the size of the head. So generally an adult body is about 7 to 8 heads tall, though obviously everyone's different. We should also consider that this carving is kind of cartoony or caricature-like in its sizing, so we aren't following the sizing too strictly. I spent an inordinate amount of time making the straps and the ring on the back of the wooden chest, but I really wanted to get the pose and the look down, and with that comes time. I found over time, while carving figures, that the pose really speaks volumes. Tool switch. This is not a particularly safe way to carve, please don't do this. The hands are made by basically making blocks and then carving out small slits between each finger. Once you've carved the slits, you can shape the fingers a little bit more for realism. This sort of tends to be my way of imagining a carving in my head. I make a squarish shape, bigger than the final size, and slowly work my way down. These parts of the chest pose another problem, having to thin down a lot of the chest to make the hinges and latch stand out. This is where the tiny chisels really come in handy. I looked up a fair few pictures and 3D models and things of armour and stuff online and picked out certain features that I liked. I would recommend using Sketchfab to check out some 3D models to help with proportions, and also drawing a lot. The more you draw, the more you'll understand sizes and shapes. Tool switch, oh dear. Once the body was done, the flag needed to be cut out. This is one of the more daunting parts of the process. Once again, I'm starting with a squarish shape to help my doofus brain understand it more. Done. If you're going to drill a hole through something that will be fragile, make sure you drill it before you make it fragile. So in this case, we drilled the hole for the flag post to go through and then carved it into the flag shape. Coping saw and a vise can really help with extra shaping when you need it. I'm not saying you couldn't do all this with a knife, but sometimes a saw saves a lot of time. The wavy pattern and cleaning out the troughs was enjoyable but tricky. So let's just assume for a second that I messed up and split a part of the flag. Here's how you'd fix it. You need the broken piece, a piece of paper, a gap spreader, and a little dab of glue on a tasty chocolate wrapper. Get something inside the hole to just about pull apart the split. Dip your piece of paper in the glue and get it right inside that gap. Then pull out your gap spreader. Your glue is now in the perfect place and the flag is fixed. I didn't even bother with the clamp here because it was tight enough to bond itself. We're employing the drill hole through fragile thing before it's fragile technique again. I had to come up with a solution to hold the flagpole in place, and this is what I came up with. It was important to me with this sculpture that I made it so everything looked like it belonged, and it's kind of hard to have that cohesion when creating a design, but I think I got away with it. Now we're on to another technique I like to use when creating small pieces that attach to something else, and that is templates. All we need to do is make a few measurements and draw what we want to fit within that measurement, in this case a sword and a scabbard. We can use our little template to measure against the sculpture before we cut it from the wood, thus ensuring even more accuracy and fewer mistakes. Once again, this could be done with a knife, but I just like to use the swords to cut as close to the line as possible before moving on to the knife and chisels. A scroll saw would have been handy here, but I don't have one, and luckily on sculptures this size, these pieces are so small that we can cut them fairly quickly. I just straight up glued the sword to the side of the chest, after flattening both pieces as much as I could to ensure a good bond. Then I used one of the handy pump clamps again to hold it in place until it dried. This carving is based on this drawing I made during an October drawing challenge called Nighttober. The prompt for that day was Journey, so I want the pose to reflect the long, difficult and arduous journey, taking a big labouring step onto the rock, and the way he's almost readjusting the straps helps to enforce that feeling. I began the painting with a light brown wash to bring out the details and still have the grain visible. After that I began adding the colours bit by bit, starting with the grey for his armour. I'd now like to thank my first two patrons who are both top tier patrons. Ryan Bolan and John Aitken, you guys are fantastic. Thank you for being full jaffers, you tasty so-and-sos. I wanted to leave the chest and ground that original colour from the wash and add different but similarly toned colours to the rest of the piece. I tried to keep the acrylics on the slightly watery side so I could build up layers to my liking. The flag was particularly tricky because I wanted to keep the burgundy paint away from the white hair. I find that when applying paint to a very small or thin area, it's always good to try and only just touch the surface with the brush, like with these tiny legs. Then to bring all the colours together, I made a very watery dark brown wash to paint over the whole thing. When that dried, I added some white highlights with a dry brush, and here's what we got. Sir Mareo Davose really plods through marshes and over mounds, heavily weighed down by the loss of his squire and friend, Rovey Victret. 6 days ago, Rovey observed his knight in distress and bravely thrust his body before him, taking a spear through the chest. Rovey's heroic actions in battle earned him an uncommon ceremonial burial. The fatigued Sir Mareo had to carry his cremated remains to his hometown, on foot, while fully armoured. Rovey's family flag, the white hare, must also be flown. There's no mistaking a burial walk. Passers-by will bow their heads in respect and keep the knight fed as he trudges often hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles to honour his fallen squire. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Catch you again soon.